Good morning, my name is Bryson Barthol, and I'll be going over my PNP4 DazeL project. So the first thing I want to go over is my Trello board. We see over here my two features, the spike ball and the fire tile. The NPC is the spike ball. It's right here on the Unity page. What it does is it patrols either up or down or left and right for a certain amount of time, and if it hits the player, it does damage, and if it goes over the fire tile, it will get a buff and do more damage. The player cannot destroy it unless they have the hammer, so in this display you won't see the hammer, so it won't be getting destroyed. I'll do a quick demo here. So we have player movement, and we see the patrolling of the spike ball. In the console, we're going to see where the damage is actually done. Because there's no hearts on screen, or there's no actual reference, we're just going to see print statements. But when it gets hit, there's a player loses 1 heart dialogue. In the actual code, it would be something to do with the UI and the actual tracking of the player's health. So as we see it go over, we see the color change of the spike ball, meaning that it's been buffed by the fire. And on the console, we see the spike ball does 2 damage, just reprint it again and again, and if it hits the player, it'll do 2 damage as well. And the buff is on a timer as well as the moving. So when it's removed, it just does another print statement, which removes the buff. So it has collision with the player, and it just reverses direction. It also has collision with the wall. You'll see that right there. And so those are its 2 collisions. It only triggers over the fire, that's it. So 2 collisions and the 1 trigger, and the animation change. So we'll go over the feature in Trello right here. NPC movement, that's simple, up, down, left, right, and the testing. The patrol timer is for the spike ball. Let me pull up the code so we can look at that. So the patrolling is there's 2 timers on the spike ball. One is the basic timer for the patrol, and the second one is for the fire buff. So they're both called an update, and they basically just flip the direction of the transform when the timer has been ran out, and then the timer resets to 0. So it just counts up, gets to a certain time, and then reverses the direction. So these 2, the NPC can turn 180 degrees after the timer and loops it back. Those have been changed. Now it doesn't rotate in direction, it will just reverse the direction. The ball doesn't need to spin 180 degrees. The restart of the patrol timer is right here. The timer set back to 0. NPC collides and reverses direction on collision with the player. We saw that. And that is on collision enter. If transform name is the test player, then it resets the timer to 0, which will turn the spike ball around. Also, the player loses 1 heart. If that's where, right here is where the code would go, that would attach to the UI as well as the player to remove the health. Reverse direction wall, test both collisions, we both showed that. Player loses health on collision, we see that. NPC can trigger fire buff when passing through the fire. So we saw that when the NPC, the spike ball, turned red, and then gains 1 attack damage, so it would have the spike ball does 2 damage now. That's where you see that. NPC loses buff after the buff duration runs out. We saw that when the material turned back to white rather than the red color. We'll go over to fire tile. Fire tile, display visible to the player. So we see the red square. It's primitive, basic, but in an actual game, it's just a blackout. So in an actual game, it'd be some sort of fire animation. Fire triggers the spike ball's fire buff. We saw that when it turned red. The buff lasts for 3 seconds. That is actually, the timer is actually the buff time right here. So it's 1 second. It can be changed to 3 seconds, however long it needs to be. And the time is all updated in the update function. Fire gets stomped out by the player. Oh, so I didn't show you that, but I will right now. So I'm going to show the player health loss right now over stomping out the fire. So what happens is you just walk on it and the player loses 1 heart, and it's just, I'm going away now, that's coming from the fire buff. Since it goes away, it no longer exists and the buff no longer triggers. Fire isn't destroyed by other NPCs. We see that with the if this one were to walk over it, it has no trigger value in the code for the fire trigger. It has no one other than test player, as well as the spike ball, so it won't interact at all with any other NPCs. And we saw the persistence of the spike of the fire tile when the spike ball went over it. We also saw the changing color of the material of the spike ball when it gained the buff. So we'll go over my code to see if there's anything else. So this is where the buff time of the fire buff is controlled. It's also in the update function. It's the second timer. So if the timer is greater than the patrol time, then it'll change directions. But if the timer is larger than the buff time and fire buff is true, because that's a boolean up here. If fire buff is true, then it will remove the timer. So that's it for the NPC as well as the fire tile. They've been tagged with major and dependent because the fire tile is dependent on the actual spike ball. Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Discord. The last thing I'd like to mention is my sources. So I did use the Unity documentation, mostly for the material as well as for rigid body and for translate. Or transform, sorry, my apologies. I also used the scripting community discussions. I had a couple of questions, so I searched them up in here and found them. There's one YouTube link that I used for different types of movement, and I will put that in with the sources at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.